All right, so we are, let's back out of this, because we just moving on up here. Okay, we are in, what happened to that slide? Okay, guess I accidentally created a duplicate slide, but anyway, so we're, oh, it's not going to let me start there. Okay. That's the issue. Okay, here we are. This is where we left off at. We're going to finish up John chapter 4. So let's get right into it. Back to, and like I said, I brought it before, when we come to these sections of these sevens, that I'm always going to highlight them before we get into it. And so this is one of the seven. This is the second of the pre-crucifixion miracles that Jesus does before his crucifixion that's recorded in John. So in John chapter 4, verses 46 through 54, so Jesus came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water wine, and there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he had heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and implored him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Then Jesus said to him, "Unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe." Now, this is the area that we're talking about right here. So he would have traveled from this location up here, Capernaum. He would go down along the road to avoid going over, the mountains. So he would have gone down, and then he would have gone up to Cana, this individual that was coming to get his son healed. So again, Capernaum and Cana. It's a good distance traveled. If it was straight line from Capernaum to Cana, it would be 16 miles. 16 miles walking distance, and it'd be at a higher elevation. And as you can see on this topographic map right here, you'd see that you kind of got a lot of, terrain that you have to go over right here in mountainous areas. So again, they would have simply followed the road down into here where it was right there, and they would have followed it up. That would have been the easiest and the safest distance. And of course, that would add on more than 16 miles. So let's go back. The nobleman said, "Sir, come down before my child dies." And Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your son lives." So the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him, and he went his way. And as he was now going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, "Your son lives." Then he inquired of them the hour when he got better, and they said to him, "Yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him." So the father knew that it was at the same hour in which Jesus said to him, "Your son lives." And he himself believed, and his whole household. This again is the second sign Jesus did when he had come to Judea of Galilee. So we see here again, even John is highlighted. This is the second sign. And again, this is the struggles that people are dealing with, being the Gospel of John was written, the last Gospel. And it's being written to individuals who already have heard quite a great deal about Jesus. They know the name Jesus. They know that people claim that he's the Messiah. But in this era, a lot of them haven't actually witnessed him, haven't seen him, haven't had an opportunity to see the miracles, haven't had an opportunity to ask him questions. And so again, this is like, if you were going to submit court-documented evidences, you're listing, in order, and you're going and you're saying, hey, here's this witness, and here's that witness, and here's this witness, and here's the thing that he did here, and here's the thing he did there. And you're building a case. And so in the same way, he's building a case in the second sign. Now, I've got two things highlighted here. omnipotence and omnipresence. Now, in the sense of omnipresence, and that one might be a little bit hard to see in this, and we get the omnipotence, all powerful. But anyways, he said, it's recording.
Okay.
Okay. He said, your son lives. And immediately upon saying your son lives, his son was healed. And we know that from the very hour. So, and again, we have some amazing things in our technology today. If you were to fly to another state, like say you were going to go from Kentucky to Texas, and you get to Texas and you realize, hey, you traveled and you left without your life-sustaining medication. You know, say you need certain medication. I don't know, say you're diabetic and you need insulin. Well, you know, you can call your physician or your pharmacist and they can transfer your script to wherever local place there is. And even if it is a controlled substance or you only get it so very often, they'll make an exception because you need your medication and they'll approve it. And so that's amazing how that can be done over time and space, right? But it still involves a process and calling and you're taking a medication. Now imagine if you were in that same trip and you were down there in Texas and you're out there walking and you got bit by a rattlesnake. And it can happen. When I was down there in Texas training, you would hear this rattle and you just go, nope, walking that way. But anyway, so you got bit by a rattlesnake and you would just call your physician back here in Louisville, Kentucky and say, hey doc, I got bit by a rattlesnake, can you make me better? And he was like, you got it, you're healed. All right, thank you. That's what we're kind of talking about. Takes it to a next level. And so he says it, and just by commanding it, your son lives, his son is made better that very hour. So that's the omnipotence, but because of the distance, that's also omnipresence. You know, Christ didn't need to be in that presence necessarily. Of course, he didn't need to touch him to make him healed. He just had to say it. But when you think about it, that means that his power is everywhere. There's no place that Christ's power doesn't touch. And in so that being the case, it means that he is, again, omnipresent. So, you know, just an interesting little thing, over 16 miles straight distance. This is brought up, and of course you get towards the end of the Gospel of John, and we know that he did so many other miracles, but these things were written so that what? So that we would believe. And so, you know, this idea of this nobleman from this location, I'm sure his story went out far and wide. And maybe if the nobleman had even passed at this point, maybe the son still lives. And so somebody could have potentially gone there to Capernaum. And they could have walked around and said, hey, we've got this gospel out there, this good news saying that this Jesus did this miracle. Can you verify this? And they'd be, oh yeah, the house of the servant, you know, or the house of the Lord of the manor, or the house of the, you know, the son is right over there. And so, you know, people, and I say that because you run into a lot of issues with people today saying, well, there's doubts that arise to the validity, the credibility of the Gospels of those ancient, you know, I like to throw that word in their writings. But see, here's the thing. All of these things could have been easily disputed amongst the people of their day. You know, of all these claims, like Jesus' resurrection. Rome could have easily disputed that and crushed that. But they never did. And all of the writings that had been preserved, even the writings of Josephus, which took place after this time, even he mentions individuals that are mentioned in the New Testament, especially Jesus, and doesn't deny his existence. So, again, that's why I bring that up for us to think about, because these occurrences that happened or things that were written specifically because of their validity, because they were able to be investigated further. And again, they wouldn't have had, say, the words omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. I don't think those words would have existed back then. They might have had something kind of like an idea of something similar. But there's also a movement today, and this, I think a lot of it stems from, Islam. But, even amongst, people that profess Christianity, that Jesus nowhere claims that he is God. And so because Jesus doesn't make the claim that he's God, then he's not God. Well, he was just a good person. He was a nice man. He was a prophet. Well, the Gospel of John solidly lays all of that to rest. I mean, even from the very beginning, we see that Jesus is God and speaks everything into existence. That he was there in the beginning. He was there before the beginning. And then as we go around this through his life, think about the Gnostic teachers of 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, denying his bodily presence and that he was only in spirit form. Throughout the Gospel of John, both the humanity and the deity of Christ are equally given highlight. And so that we see that God is tabernacling with us the whole journey through, up into the cross and then after the resurrection. So just keep that in mind. So this brings us into chapter 5. We're now in chapter 5, and you have this fairly long section. We're not going to delve into all of these verses, but this is the healing of a man at the pool of Bethesda, chapter 5, verses 1 through 47. And this is again the third of the 7 miracles before crucifixion. So we come to this scene in verse 5 where you have a certain man who had an infirmity 38 years. And when Jesus saw him lying there, he knew that he already had been in that condition a long time. And he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" This is an interesting kind of question, right? We see that this man's infirmity prevented him from being able to even walk. And he laid there on his bed by this pool, intending for someone to, help him and let him touch the water when the water is stirred so he can be healed. And he can't. And so Jesus walks up to this man, again, well-known, 38-year history, okay? And he asked him, "Do you want to be made well?" God asking consent. And again, I think of this because there's another thing that I deal with all the time, is about how can a good and just God send people to heaven. And I relate to him. I'm like, okay, what are the attributes of God? And I get things like love. And I'm like, okay, we'll go a little further. Well, light. I'm like, okay, go a little further. Goodness, peace, joy, harmony. Okay? So, okay, every good thing is of God. Now imagine you choose not to live with God. What does that leave you with? It leaves you with no light. It leaves you with no love. It leaves you with no peace and no joy, no hope. It's the exact opposite. And so it's not that he wants to, it's just that he cannot dwell with sin. Sin cannot dwell with him. He wants to have a place with us. And that's why we're not, just automatrons. We're not just solely running around on, animal instinct. It's like I've got, how many cats we got again? 5? Okay, we got 5 cats. Sometimes I got to check because they always seem to be multiplying, even though they're all fixed. So we got 5 cats. We've got 2 dogs. We got 2 bunnies. So we got a lot, right? And the thing is, I have got pretty much all those animals pegged on their behaviors and what they're going to do. And the cats have, even though there's a spectrum, they all have their cat behavior. And the dogs have their dog behavior. The bunnies have their bunny behavior. And the bunnies will never, ever try to become dogs, and the dogs will never, ever try to become bunnies because they're guided by their instinct that God gave them. It's amazing when you see birds fly and how they're able to always find their nest, and they travel. You got these huge migrations. Barbara, you're really big about birds, and you watch them and you see them. They travel thousands of miles, don't they? And they'll go to the same locations year after year and never get lost. And sometimes, I'll go to a business or establishment and not go back there for 6-9 months, and I forget. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, senior moment. But the instincts that guide these creatures and how they are able to operate and act is just amazing. But humans, we can do all kinds of things. We can violate our own nature. So it's amazing what humans choose to do, can do, the options that we have. And again, because we're given choice. And so in this same thing, do you want to be made well? Now this is talking about an infirmity. And so, and I've brought this up before in times past about the same opportunity to be a child of God. So we see this as God's graciousness. He doesn't want the man to be sick. He wants him to be made well. But he gives him the option. He gives him the choice. He doesn't make him well. He doesn't say, you lazy bum, get up and start walking. And I'm done with you being lazy and crippled and infirm. No. He gives him the option. Now, in verse 8 through 10, and Jesus said to him, rise, take up your bed and walk. And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed and walked. And that day was the Sabbath. The Jews therefore said to him, who was cured, it is the Sabbath, it is not lawful for you to carry your bed. 38 years. 38 years, and the guy's able to walk after 38 years. Commanded by God to rise up and walk and take up his bed. They should have glorified God. They should have praised God. But instead, they held to their traditions. This isn't the law. This is their traditions. Now, in Exodus 31, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak also to the children of Israel, saying, surely my Sabbaths you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. You shall keep the Sabbath, therefore, for it is holy to you. Everyone who profanes it shall surely be put to death. For whoever does any work on it, that person shall be cut off from among his people. Work shall be done for 6 days, but the 7th is the Sabbath of rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death. Therefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and on the 7th day he rested and was refreshed. And when he had made an end of speaking with him on Mount Sinai, he gave Moses 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone written with the finger of God. But they've always had problems with keeping the Sabbath. Okay? They've always had issues with that. And we can see in Jeremiah chapter 17, verses 19 through 23. Thus the Lord said to me, go and stand in the gate of the children of the people, by which the kings of Judah come in, and by which they go out, and in all the gates of Jerusalem, and say to them, hear the word of the Lord, you kings of Judah, and all Judah, and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem who enter by the gates. Thus saith the Lord, take heed to yourselves to bear no burden on the Sabbath day, nor bring it by the gates of Jerusalem, nor carry a burden out of your houses on the Sabbath day, nor do any work. But hallow the Sabbath day, as I commanded your fathers, but they did not obey, nor incline their ear, but made their neck stiff, that they might not hear nor receive instructions. Now it's really important here, this idea of burden, because this is kind of what they're talking about when they're saying that he's carrying his bed, that he's carrying a burden. But when you look at Jeremiah, what it's talking about as in a burden is a work. So something that you do to make a profit. So if he was selling beds, if he made beds and he sold them and he was carrying them out and he was putting them out to the gates for people to buy and sell, that would be a violation of the Sabbath. But for him, and think about it, his bed is his house. He doesn't own a house. He's maybe going back to his family or whatever, but he's no longer having to stay at this pool. He can pick up and he can go and he can carry his bed. He can go, offer a gift at the temple, or he can go see the priest, or he can go back to his family. He's released from that location. And that's all it is. He's not breaking the Sabbath. But they're traditions, and if you read, even today, the current rules of Sabbath keeping, and it goes and it goes and goes and goes. Like, for example, and I didn't know this until researching this, you're not supposed to post anything to social media or websites or something like that on the Sabbath. So, like, if somebody got in trouble for this, he worked for one of these companies, and it was about the stuff going on in Israel, and he posted his comment on the Sabbath, and then he apologized for breaking the Sabbath because he posted something on the Sabbath. But you're allowed to watch. This is like, okay, so you can watch social media, but you can't post to social media. They just come up with a lot of things, and they've got their little traditions and why they do it. But verse 16. For this reason the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to kill him, because he had done these things on the Sabbath. So going forward from this point, we see that one of the central reasons on why they went after the Christ is because he did work on the Sabbath. Now, he doesn't deny this, that he worked on the Sabbath. This is how he answers. But he answered to them, my Father has been working until now, and I have been working. And they were just like, oh, that's totally cool. We get it, right? You and your father. Two totally separate entities that are not related or the same, right? No, they totally got what he was saying here. Therefore the Jews sought all the more to kill him, because he not only broke the Sabbath, but also said that God was his Father, making himself equal with the Sabbath. And again, here I highlighted some the stuff in blue, right? And again, his omnipresence and his omnipotence. Again, he healed him immediately. He didn't have to wrap up the wound. He didn't have to bandage it. He didn't have to splint it. He didn't have to give him antibiotics. He didn't have to do anything but say, rise and walk. Take up your bed and walk. Immediately he healed him. That's omnipotence. And again, my Father has been working until now, and I have been working. If you read Job and what he's talking about there, and the working and maintaining the operation and the function of the universe, in some of the Psalms, it talks about this as well. That God is in control of it all, behind it all, keeping everything turning. And so this working that he's doing, this continual working, is needed from God, because without this work, everything would cease to exist. And so this goes back to establish Jesus from the very beginning, back to John 1, where he spoke things into existence, and everything was sustained and fulfilled, and everything was kept in its being through him. And so it made me think, what did the Jews actually think God was doing on the Sabbath? Did they think that God was taking a nap? That he was resting, that he was not involved? Kind of if they did. I think about Elijah, where he was up there and the people of Baal were cutting themselves and stuff and he mocked them. One of my favorite stories in the Bible. And he was like, yell louder, for maybe your God's on a distance or he's sleeping. He's on a journey or he's sleeping. So maybe they kind of had that view, right? That, kind of like at your business where they put the little sign on the door and it'll be back at this certain hour, That God on the throne just put that little thing up there and said, I'll be back tomorrow. I'm off today. And so again, this comes back to the point of what was the point of the Sabbath. Well, a few things. One, it is a foreshadowing of Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ would be our rest. That our works would cease in Christ. We no longer have to offer the blood of bulls and goats for atonement, and it never could atone us anyways. So through Christ, our work is complete. We just have to have faith in him, and that he will do all the work, like he's been doing since the beginning. The work of the baptism, done through Christ, circumcision made without hands. The work in saving, through faith, done through Christ. That is a work. If you read John, how do we do the works of God? He says, believe in me. So, again, he is continuing to work. So the Sabbath, that's once a foreshadowing. But two, it is this idea that we're going to sanctify a day. It's interesting that it's the day between his crucifixion and his resurrection. We're going to sanctify a day where you wait on the Lord. And so they did. And so on that day, Christ could actually rest from his labor into the flesh, working here on the earth. He actually had a day of rest. And then he came back. And so this idea of waiting on the Lord and having trust that he is in charge of everything. Again, believing that, even on this day that we're all here on Sunday, it's okay. Everything is okay. I will not fall behind. And of course we don't observe the Sabbath today because the Sabbath was looking forward to the Christ, and Christ is our Sabbath, and we observe the Lord's Day. But we can see this idea of a sanctification of a day and having a whole day dedicated to God. All right, any questions about this section? Comments, thoughts? There's a lot of stuff to be brought up in this particular section. All right, so verses 21 through 25, John chapter 5. For as the Father raises the dead and gives life to them, even so the Son gives life to whom he will. And again, highlighted, and I'm pointing out here, Christ has now done some things. And so before, I was only highlighting the things that he actually done. And so when he turns water into wine, or when he heals a person, and since he's done all these things, and he's shown he has these powers, these authority, this authority to do these things, now the things that he even states that are godlike, I'm highlighting. Because we've established something, right? Okay, your employer, okay, they write you a check. I guess people still write checks these days and send them out. So they write you a check, they give you a check, and you're like, please don't bounce, please don't bounce, please don't bounce. And you go to the bank and it deposits. You're like, woo! You know that check is good. They have the authority. And so then the next time you get a check, you don't seem to have that concern. Because you know they have the authority to pay you. They have the money in the bank. All right? Just as an example. And we see this with so many other things. People say, and Peter writes about this, people say, well, everything's been the same since the very beginning. The sun rises, the sun sets, and nothing is ever going to change. And so we take things for granted, and we're like, it's always going to be this way. Well, in this case, we see Christ's consistency that when he is God, and the things that he says will come to be, this is, again, an indicator of his godhood. So when it says the Son gives life to whom he will, this is a power only reserved for God. And you can read about this all throughout the Old Testament. God is the source of life. God is the giver of life. God is the sustainer of life. It's written throughout the Psalms, beautifully crafted over and over and over again, that God alone has the right, has the authority and the power to give life to whomever he wishes. And so when the Son, and they'll say, well, he says he calls himself the Son of Man, the Son of Man, the Son of Man, the Son of Man. So that means he's not God. When the Son gives life to whom he will, he's saying, I am God. And again, everybody would get this. For the Father judges no one, but has committed all judgment to the Son, that all should honor the Son just as they honor the Father. Again, this is an equivalency statement. This is when you got equal to, in mathematical terms. Okay, so this is equal to that. So he's saying, you must honor the Son, Jesus Christ, just as you honor the Father. He who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father whom he sent. Verse 24. Most assuredly I say unto you, he who hears my word and believes in him whom sent me has everlasting life and shall not come into judgment, but has passed from death into life. Most assuredly I say unto you, the hour is coming and now is, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. So question, who are these dead people that are hearing the word? You'd be surprised some of the answers I've got. So just say whatever you think, or what people might have said to you, or what other people might have think. Who are the dead people hearing the word?
We are often told that those who have not heard the word are dead.
Okay.
They're dead in their sins.
People, so alive people in the flesh that are dead in their sins. Any other thoughts?
On the day of judgment, the dead shall rise.
Okay, so some people could say the day of judgment, the dead will rise. Okay. A lot of people use statements like this in their beliefs about purgatory. And specifically that Christ went into when he was dead, went into purgatory and preached the gospel to them. I don't know. That didn't need to happen. Everybody that was under the covenant and the promise, everybody that God made a deal with in the Old Testament and the patriarchal dispensation, the Mosaical dispensation, they're fine. That's not what he's talking about. I lend to this exact thing that Mike said here. That these individuals are like the individual who was paralyzed, quadriplegic or whatever, that couldn't walk, that needed to be made well, and Israel doesn't know that it's decrepit, that it's handicapped, that it's dead. And so everywhere he's going and speaking the word, he's speaking the word to dead people. And they're hearing the word. And if they believe the word will give them life. Anybody have any thoughts, questions, comments on that? Anything? I think it's pretty straightforward. We get into John chapter 5, verses 31 through 40. A lot of your books might have like a headline up here, the fourfold witness. And in the Old Testament, everything was established by 2 or 3. And this just goes to show that Christ goes one step further. And he says, if I bear witness of myself, that's the first witness. If I bear witness of myself, my witness is not true. There is another who bears witness of me, and I know that the witness which he witnesses of me is true. You have sent to John, this is the second witness, John the Baptist, and he has borne witness to the truth. Yet I do not receive testimony from man, which John was, but I say to these things that you may be saved. He was burning the shining lamp, and you were willing for a time to rejoice in his light. But I have a greater witness than John's, for the works which the Father has given to me to finish, the very works that I do, bear witness of me. So these works come from the Father, that the Father has sent me, and the Father himself who sent me has testified of me. So when the Father testifies of his Son by healing a man on the Sabbath, because the Father and the Son have been working since the beginning, these people should have glorified God in his coming in the flesh. So this is the third witness. And then it says, verse 38, but you do not have his word abiding in you, because whom he sent, him you do not believe. You search the Scriptures, for in them you think you have eternal life, and these are which testify of me. This is the fourth witness. The Word, the Scriptures, those testify of Christ. And again, you see Christ interwoven in everything written in the Old Testament. And it says, but you are not willing to come to me that you may have life. Again, they have to come to God to have life. Come to me to have life. This is Jesus Christ also making a statement of Godhood. And this omniscience, the Scriptures, knowing all things. I use this example a lot because a lot of people are familiar with the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? And it's made billions of dollars. They've spent hundreds of millions, maybe billions into making it. They have all these people working on it and developing it and planning it out they planned it out for nearly a decade. They had all these lore masters working on it. They had all these comic books going back from, I think back to the 60s that they could draw inspiration from and get it all together. And then what happens? They have a convoluted mess. Now granted, they were entertaining movies. They made a lot of money. People liked them. But you constantly had to have oh, wait a minute, this contradicted that and this contradicted that. And wait a minute, I thought Captain America was the first Avenger, but now they're saying Miss Marvel's the first Avenger because Captain America was under ice and she was the one that had the first superhero powers. And it's just and where were the green guys during all this time, because they were back predated before this. And the green guys worked with Kara, what's the guy with the eye patch? What's his name? Anybody? Nick Fury. And so anyways, they have to constantly change things up. And they have to basically do a rewrite of history, right? Try to keep the continuity. Scriptures don't do that. These are written from, dozens of individuals. Okay? Over 60 books over the span well over 2,000 years. Job being probably the oldest book, predating the Pentateuch. The books, attributed to Moses. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy. So, it's a long time. And all of these things that were written came to exact conclusion. The prophecies and things like this. So again, having this foreknowledge, being able to know everything that was going to happen. How would they know exactly what hill he was going to be crucified on? This kind of gets into a little bit of the weeds, but historical evidence and archaeological type, things that they when they're looking at where Abraham would have offered Isaac was in that same area, maybe the same hill. You know, the depiction of, you know, two men, one on one side, one on the other, hanging from a tree. And again, I get it, some of this is figurative language, because it doesn't lay it out exactly, because humans could read exactly and go, well, listen, hey, it says he was going to be hung on a cross, so we can't let that be fulfilled. So it said hung on a tree. You know, you have the bronze serpent snake and Jesus, both hung. And again, you have these similarities. And so the fact that the scriptures were able to 100% reliably depict everything that happened during the crucifixion, which is the culminating event, the central event of the scriptures. It's not creation. It's Christ who's in the center of all of it. The Son who's in the center, that everything revolves around. And so that's just, you know, again, an example of his omniscience. Any questions, comments, thoughts about the fourfold witnesses? No? Oh, we're moving right along. Verses 45 through 47. Again, back to the scriptures and how they attest of him. Do not think that I shall accuse you to the Father. There is one who accuses you, Moses, in whom you trust. For if you believed Moses, you would believe in me. Capital Me. For he wrote about me. But if you do not believe his writings, how will you believe my words? His writings, my words. Again, it's an equivocal depiction of these two words, these two statements. They're equal. So the words that were given to Moses are equivalent to the words that Christ speaks. Again, predating Moses, back all the way to John chapter 1, back to Genesis chapter 1. And again, you can read some of these passages that were written by Moses. Genesis chapter 49, verse 10. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh comes. Exodus 12, verse 46. In one house it shall be eaten, talking about the Passover. You shall not carry any of the flesh outside the house, nor shall you break one of its bones. And again, talking about the Christ. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 1 through 5, we see, moreover, brethren, I do not want you to be unaware that all our fathers were under the cloud and passed through the sea. In this Exodus story, that they walked across dry ground. In verse 2, all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. All ate the same spiritual food, all drank the same spiritual drink. And again, this idea is the continuation of the children of Abraham into us, this transition. For they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. Just like we eat the same spiritual bread, we drink the same spiritual drink, bread of Christ, fruit of the vine, which is the blood of Christ, and bread is the body of Christ. But with most of them, God was not well pleased, for their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. So that, we have these examples of the things that Moses wrote about that was alluding to the Christ. We see here in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 15 through 22. This is the one that everybody goes to when they're talking about Moses writing about his replacement, the Lord. It said, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst, from your brethren. Him you shall hear, according to all you desired of the Lord your God in Horeb, in the day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, nor let me see this great fire any more, lest I die. Although the Lord said to me, what they have spoken is good, I will rise up for them a prophet like you from among their brethren, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And it shall be that whoever will not hear my words, Christ's words, capital my, which he speaks in my name, I will require of him. Again, my words, my name, he speaks, all capital, all equal, representative of God. And then we'll finish this up. And it says, but the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die. And if you say in your heart, how should we know the word which the Lord has not spoken? When a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the thing does not happen or come to pass, that thing which the Lord has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously, you shall not be afraid of him. So again, here is the Christ literally healing people that have been infirm for 38 years, turning water into wine. We are going to see him bringing people back from the dead. All of these instances of his miraculous wonders, his signs and his wonders, giving that fourfold witness. Moses prophesied of him in the scriptures. God says here, this is how you'll know that he's of mine. The things that he says will come to pass. That is the third. We saw John the Baptist, who was to pave the way and make the road straight. And Jesus himself testifying, calling himself equal with the Father. So we have the fourfold witness concluding right here. And Moses, Moses is even a witness of him because Moses in the scriptures. So we're going to pick back up in John chapter 6, feeding the 5,000 and walking on water, both two miracles that happen there. So thank you for your kind attention, and we're going to be dismissed. 10 minutes.